You guys know my wonderful co-host. Zoya is love. Zoya is life. How you doing? We got a lot of great guests for this final panel of the Revolutionary Blackout Anti-Imperialist Summit. How you doing, Zoya? Sticking in there? We already had another earlier panel.
Oh yeah, this is the finish line, and we're going to finish strong with a lot of awesome, knowledgeable guests that I feel privileged enough to call friends. Here so they actually, all loading in.
a lot of these people I've seen on Twitter. This is the first time I have opportunity to have a conversation with these wonderful comrades. So I want to give you an opportunity because this is the first time we have you guys on show. Let me take the banner off so you guys can see their names and everything. Let me fix this. I'm sorry, 1 second. And then I want to give you guys an opportunity. There you go. Now you guys see their names, their handles. Now I want to introduce Mikey. I know we talked a few times on Twitter. And I always love your takes on all these issues. So I want to take this opportunity to introduce you, and then we go Rick, and then we will go Brad. Kind of how your politics and when you start really getting into activism, into politics. So just kind of good introduction to yourself, Mikey.
Aloha, yeah. Thanks for having me on, Nick. Nice to finally talk to you via video. Yeah, so my name's Mikey. I live in Hawaii. I'm an Asian settler. I use he, him pronouns, and I'm born and raised here on Oahu, and I'm an organizer with the Oahu Water Protectors and the Shutdown Red Hill Mutual Aid Collective. And over the past about 7 months now, we have been organizing to shut down Red Hill, which is a series of fuel tanks that contain at their maximum about 250 million gallons of toxic jet fuel and marine diesel that were constructed in World War II and have been leaking ever since. In 2014, they leaked about 14,000 gallons of jet fuel, and in late 2021, tens of thousands more gallons of fuel leaked, but this time directly into the Navy's water lines, which went to thousands of people, mainly in military housing, but also into certain civilian communities where thousands of people, children, babies, and pets were poisoned. And for about 100,000 households, their water is still undrinkable. Their homes are still contaminated. Yeah, it's wild and just unconscionable, right? I mean, it's a literal war crime because it's also happening on stolen land, with stolen resources and despoiling such a precious water source. But anyway, we'll definitely get into more of that later. But so through Oahu Water Protectors, we successfully mobilized, organized, and agitated to the point where just about a month ago, Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin had to announce that they were planning to permanently shut down Red Hill for good. But there are still families that need help, that need solidarity, that need mutual aid. And we are continuing to build power because we are facing a historic drought in the summer due to climate change, which is also caused by the military in large part, but also because we have lost access to about 50% of our downtown Honolulu water supply because they were shut off by the Board of Water Supply as with an abundance of caution because the Navy is not being transparent or possibly doesn't even know how the fuel plume that continues to be in our aquifer is moving. And if that fuel continues to travel and eventually gets into our municipal water system, that could spell the end of life on Oahu as we know it. So this is why we're continuing to organize and to fight, because the fight is really just beginning. And that's kind of what me and Brad are engaged in mutual aid as well, is to serve the people, but also to build bridges of solidarity between military families and Kanaka Maoli, who are the ancestral relations of this land and its historical protectors and defenders.
Well said, Mikey. And when I actually talk about the climate crisis, when I talk about our ruling class polluting our water, I have a much different rhetoric than you find from the standard shit-lib who don't really care about the issue. Where my form of climate activism is abolishing the military and prison industrial complex. And now when we talk about the climate issue as well, it's honestly at this point we got to try and mitigate the damage. and because it's really too late based on how our corporate masters have destroyed the planet. But I think also time for conversations about climate justice. Now that's a conversation that makes people uncomfortable. And Mikey, do you want to add something? It seemed like you want to. Do you want to add anything?
Yeah. I want to give everyone else a chance to introduce themselves. But yeah, I mean,
Mikey, can you please just tell the audience who don't know you as an organizer about what you won in Hawaii against the Pentagon?
Oh, to abolish the U.S. military. But also,
I mean, you guys had a victory there, right?
Oh yes. So yeah, we were able to extract a world historic victory from the U.S. military, which rarely takes L's, right? But we extracted a pretty big one through engaging existing international solidarity networks with comrades in Guahan, Palestine, Korea, Okinawa, all over the world. Red Nation. All of these indigenous collectives. Steve Donziger was one of the most proactive people to help signal boost our message. A bunch of comrades online, including y'all, it's been a wild ride, very little sleep, but miles to go before we get more sleep. But I mean, rest is revolutionary too. But also, just speaking to the U.S. military as the greatest polluter on the planet, right? They have a larger carbon footprint than over 140 countries combined, and I think it was Abby Martin and Mike Preisner are working on a film about this. But like, even if every single country on the planet, including the United States, go to net zero, if the U.S. military continues to exist, we still will not reach our climate projections. And as we just learned, right, with the final IPCC report, until the window closes on our ability to act on this, we have about 30 months left, give or take. And that's assuming that knockoff effects and cascade effects don't make us already too late. But I don't think we're too late. And even if we are, I want to fight for the ashes. I want to provide palliative care to a dying planet, or dying humanity. But I still don't believe it's too late. I'm all about this. Hope is a discipline, right? As Miriam Kaba has often said, I need to see that in my living room every day because I need a constant reminder. But yeah, thanks so much.
Yeah, I think one of the reasons why we gotta fight is because we got to, in my opinion, I think we have to implement socialism because that's the only way we can survive in a post-climate crisis world. Because we already in that post-climate crisis environment. Now we can kind of help scale it back, but we got game plan ways to survive this. Because whether you guys believe it or not, the capitalist class is going to be okay. And I'm not talking about the workers. You guys are not capitalists. You guys are workers, right? I'm talking about the millionaire class, the people who made the climate crisis worse. They're going to find their bunkers. They're going to be able to relocate. But what about the millions that are going to have to migrate in places that are inhabitable right now? But maybe we will touch base on this a little bit later. I don't want to rant too much. I want to get, I think I said Rick next. I think I said Rick is next. So let's do Rick and then we do Brad as an introduction in terms of how you got in politics, what kind of radicalized you, and what kind of organizing work you do, if any. Like what, Rick, this is a good time to introduce yourself.
Oh, hello everyone. Nice to see everyone outside of the Twitter space. I don't use my name formally and I shouldn't, but I will today. So I've been organizing for quite a bit now. I started a while ago when I was in my teenage years in India. I was part of the Students Federation of India, organizing in my home state in West Bengal, Kolkata. And then currently I am in the United States in Dallas, in the DFW Metroplex, specifically in Arlington. And I've been, involved with a few organizations, particularly the Freedom Road Socialist Organization. And initially I was working with essentially student work, and now I've continued into mass organizing, community-based organizing with regards to police-related crimes, and organizing communities and heightening their political consciousness against the arm of the state, which represses oppressed nationalities, communities in every sector, in every segment of this country that was usurped from the indigenous people, and then utilized for its own capital gain, and then repression and the bringing in of slaves from Africa, and the continued harassment of people across United States as well. As Mikey said, Hawaii is one example. Puerto Rico is another example of neo-colonial, places where this happens as well. And my organizing basically surrounds organizing against repression by the police, heightening their consciousness, and working towards a more democratic form of policing. That is what we call in our organization. And I work with the National Alliance Against Racist and Political Repression, what we know as community control of the police. It's a transitory phase in which we believe that it will give and empower community organizers to have more control over the police, and ultimately, when we have our successes and victories, we will abolish the system of capitalism, and then we will have more empowerment of the peoples of this country. That's what. If there's more questions, I can go on.
We got a few topics we want to get into as well. I want to get Brad an opportunity to introduce yourself. You can add anything to what we discussed as well, but just give me your general political takes and where you at, and just a general introduction.
Yeah, thanks, Nick. Hey, Mikey. Nice to meet you on the video call, Rick. I've heard you in some spaces before. I was smiling to myself, realizing, I know who Rick is. But yeah, I'm Brad. I'm a white Haole settler in Hawaii. I'm a software developer by day, and got family, kids, all that business. But yeah, I kind of, in my free time, like to read a lot. Just been reading more like theory, history, kind of just trying to figure out like why the world is the way it is kind of how I got to where I am. I come from pretty a variety of like privileged positionalities, but it bothered me that I did not understand why there was like so much like injustice and inequality surrounding me. And I kind of just relentlessly kept reading until I kind of, found like Marxism, Leninism, and it kind of helped make sense of almost everything that I saw around me in ways that, more accessible like ways of looking at the world just could not explain these phenomena I was seeing. So that's kind of like how I got to kind of where I'm at. As Mikey mentioned, some of the organizing work we do, been involved in several mutual aid organizations. Also tried to organize some kind of collective study groups to kind of elevate the consciousness of folks who are doing organizing work, in the hopes that we can, through those works, not only like build connections in community, but elevate our own consciousness and understanding of the circumstances in which we find ourselves, which here in Hawaii centers very much around colonialism, imperialism, and capitalism, with Hawaii being really the center of U.S. operations in the Pacific, and one of the first outposts of American imperial domination, with the overthrow and annexation of Hawaii occurring shortly after the closing of the frontier at Wounded Knee, and the American capitalist imperialist class then turning a view to the broader world and the domination of the entire Pacific. And so I think, that's something I always keep in mind when I think about and when I look around and see situations like Red Hill, all the other ways that the military occupation of Hawaii and the way that Hawaiian culture is just commodified and sold in service to this toxic combination of militarism and tourism, and the whole concept of this paradise that is sold to, you know, mostly unwitting, like just ordinary people who want to just have a vacation. It's just very indicative of the ways that, you know, capitalism can take something that's very just extremely beautiful and one of the most like incredible places and like cultures in existence, and can just like cheapen it and you know, turn it into something plastic that it's so those are kind of the things I think a lot about and read a lot about. I've always been a history nerd, and so I've been kind of really appreciating these perspectives that help me understand history versus when I was a kid and I'd read like World War II history, but never really could make sense of any of it. So
yeah, same here. And I explained this many times how history actually helped radicalize me, right? And we were talking about conspiracy theories earlier when we had our history of CIA panel, and I always brought up like the idea that people don't conspire is ridiculous, because when you study history, you realize that human history is is the history of people conspiring, maintaining power, coming with secret plots, and then you also see the history of the human race is the history of colonialism, of war, of empire. So I'm seeing this happen over and over again. I'm seeing governments lie to people over and over again. So then I'm looking at today, and I'm like, am I really supposed to believe that all this horrific shit that I read in history is gone? So since I learned when you read history, you learn what's possible, and then when you know what's possible, I'll start looking around. Like, okay, who's doing the evil shit today? Like when you look at when Napoleon, King Leopold, when you look at like the most influential leaders, some people responsible for some of the worst crimes, I was like, all right, who's doing that today? And I just so happened to grow up during the Iraq War, and it was pretty easy to see who was the big bad guy then. I saw George Bush killing millions of Middle Eastern people. So I want to get Zoya in here as well. She helped throw this panel together. She's much more acquainted with a lot of these people on the panel more than I am. Zoya, for people who may not know you, give you a quick introduction and your general take on like imperialism. Good way to introduce you for this panel. We're to move on to the next topic. I want to get Zoya Love in here.
Well, I'm Nick's anger translator. No, I'm just kidding. I co-founded 10 Demands with Nick. I consider him a friend, but also I just want to take a minute to thank Nick and CJ and Josana and Sabby and Rome and JB and all the amazing people at Revolutionary Blackout Network for putting together these summits and covering these very important topics, because I don't see anyone else doing it. And not only do they educate the masses, but they actually focus on organizing and how we can change this energy into action. So thank you very much for everything this network does. And thank you to Mikey, Rick, and Brad for joining us today. They are organizers in real life, which I have a real appreciation for. It's easy to be angry online or overwhelmed or frustrated, but these are people who are actually getting out there in community, building solidarity, and taking action into their hands, which is what I ideally want everybody who watches this network to do.
Well said, Zoya. Now that we got a good introduction, now since this is the anti-imperialist summit, I actually talk about imperialism all the time because I can tie it to a ton of topics, and also by doing that, it makes it very easy to define the problem that we are dealing with. So, I see a lot of people make mistakes when I see them act as climate activists, where they immediately head into the ordinary people had to make sacrifices. Well, I just tell people like, no, I think we need to focus on the global rich. I think we need to focus on the military industrial complex, because without focusing on them, all these little minor, small changes, it's just something that will just make us feel better. And I'm not just saying this. Look at this headline. I reported on this quite a while ago. The global rich must cut their carbon footprint by 97%. Now, once you combine that with the fact that you had the U.S. military, which is the largest polluter, to me, it seems like our goal should be obvious. Our target should be obvious. Instead of telling people to stop using straws, how about we cut the military budget? how about we actually implement a system where we redistribute the wealth, because that's what we want to do, redistribute the power. So I want to actually let's go reverse order this time. Let's start with Brad, and we go Rick and Mikey, based on what you guys have seen in your political organizing, your political knowledge as well. What do you think is the best messaging? Like, what steps that our generation should be taking in terms of addressing the climate crisis? What steps are you taking? What do you kind of advocate for? Let's start with Brad. I know that's a broad question, but you can take that however you want.
Sure, thanks. Yeah, really important stuff to think through. I think one of the challenges out there is there's this it's really remarkable to see how quickly the discourse moved from climate denialism to climate doomerism. And I think that is largely a product of our very individualistic, the kind of culture that capitalism generates, where people's identities are entirely about like wrapped up in your just like individual like consumption preferences. And
people will literally define the personalities based on what they consume.
Yeah,
I'm an Apple user. I'm a Marvel movie fan. Like, bro, that's just your consumption. That's not who you are. But that's people convinced that. But that's a great point, bro. I just want to chime in. That's a great point.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, it's it's kind of an uphill battle as far as that goes, because also the other side of that is that in the neoliberal era, there's not been a lot of wins for any kind of like collective organizations in the United States in particular. So a lot of people just don't have, like as a materialist, as a Marxist, like we understand like that our thought processes, our ideas, our entire way of viewing the world is largely shaped and determined by our life experiences and the relations and the habits and the activities that we engage in. And so for people who grow up in this combination of this individualistic culture, consumption preferences, thinking of yourself as a consumer before and focusing on how you interact with the circulation sphere of the economy, and ignoring or just like being politely quiet about the whole how you interact with the productive sphere as like a worker or someone who's petty bourgeois or this, that, and the other. With that kind of culture, and then the combination of not having the experience in your life of like winning something through collective action, it's just very, very easy for people to slide straight into just like a doomerism. So I think that's like a big challenge. I don't know exactly. I think that like the necessity as economic conditions deteriorate, I think that we're probably going to see a lot more struggle emerge, and you will begin to see people will begin to reacquire those experiences of collective action, like we see like with the Amazon labor union, some of those kinds of struggles. And that will literally begin to reshape the wiring of people's brains to where they have a different expectation, a different way of relating to the world. So I'm hopeful that some of those contradictions that are causing like a decline in overall living standards, and honestly a decline in the what could be called the wages of whiteness, or like a labor aristocracy, and the generally advantageous position that the United States economy occupies in relation to the rest of the world, where resources and labor that are cheap in so much of the world, Latin America, Africa, South Asia, means that I can go buy bananas for like 45 cents a pound. I think that as some of those kind of perks, the upsides of imperialism start to deteriorate, I think that we're going to see just a continued increase in those kinds of, class struggle within the United States. And out of that, I think people will begin to have a different mindset, or at least I'm hopeful that they will.
Yeah, thank you for that, Brad. I also want to get Rick in here. I want to share this because Mikey sent me this great story here, because it kind of sums up what I was saying. So let's take a look at this. I'm gonna give Rick's thoughts as well. You see, survival of the richest. The wealthy are plotting to leave us behind, and not only just the climate crisis. This is a great article. I was skimming through. I'm gonna definitely read this whole thing. But it even connects to the imperialism that we're seeing now. Like when you see the sanctions war and economic war that's going on against Russia, when they know food shortages is gonna start, they know that this going to devastate the quality of life in Europe. but it's one of the things where the rich is not going to be affected. You think rising gas prices? Do you think the sacrifices of offensive imperialism that is NATO and the United States strategy actually going to impact the rich? I don't think so. So I want to get Rick in here. You can add to the general conversation, but we also talking about how the relationship between like imperialism, militarism, and the fight for climate justice. So you can add anything you want, Rick.
Yeah, essentially, like, I mean, the present structure that we're in is a capitalist structure, um, and in this structure itself, I mean, it depends on who owns what and who controls the means of production, to use the Marxist framework of talking. And in this framework, we have to deal with what we call in Marxism a superstructure and a base, wherein the base is controlled by the capitalists, the ruling class, essentially, and they dominate how society will move.
Oh no.
We lost.
CIA got him.
He's gonna. I'm sure he may come back here. I want to get Mikey in here and then we let him finish.
Damn, the feds got him.
Of course,
they're quick with it. Yeah. Shoot. Well, I can speak to the article. So it's legit wild. Like when I first read it, like I had to stand up and walk around because it's like I don't want to say it's unbelievable because I totally get it, but it's like Douglas Rushkoff, he's I guess he's a socialist, but he's kind of like a futurist writer. He's pretty knowledgeable about emergent technology, but also he's part of this collective called Team Human, which he also wrote a book about. But during this one consulting gig he got paid like way more, like he says here, about half his annual professor salary for what he thought was just going to be an easy gig to talk about like Bitcoin and shit. But he ends up going into this closed room and like 5 or so incredibly wealthy, ultra rich ruling class guys come in and they start a bit of small talk, but then they ask what they really want to ask, which is, where do I go when the climate crisis hits the fan? New Zealand or Alaska? What do I do if my security force decides to revolt against me? Should I have them wear shock collars and then shock them to keep them in line, or will that only foment more unrest? Like what kind of defense system should I have in my luxury bunker? Right. So, I mean, like, you are right, Nick. Like, I think they will be okay, but I also think that life will be considerably worse for everyone. But also, like, they can't hide forever, right? People would be able to find out where those hidden places are. All you have to do is just like stuff the vents with dog shit, and they would have to come out eventually, right? Like, and
there are a lot of right wingers who are like super anti-immigration, and then they are like against climate change at the same time. And I'm telling them, what do you think going to happen when northern sub-Saharan Africa, large areas in the Middle East, become inhabitable, and then you see millions of people that are forced to flee in a massive climate refugee crisis that is expected to be the largest refugee crisis of all time? Do you think millions and millions and millions of people that were displaced due to the West, as I said, it was the top 1%, the U.S. military? Do you think they're going to be so happy just to be at the border and be denied entry? Things are going to get really interesting if we don't even come close to addressing this. And Mike, I'm going to get you back in here, but I do want to introduce Kieran. Thank you for joining us. We have a few conversations on Twitter. Hopefully I'm saying that correctly. Welcome to Revolutionary Blackout and the Anti-Imperialist Summit. I've been introducing everyone by giving them a chance to tell people how they got into politics, if they're doing any activism, and their general stance on imperialism and how it affects our world. So that's a good way to introduce you, Karen. Do you have anything to add and introduce yourself with?
Hi, thank you. I am on a few painkillers because I was at the dentist's earlier and had some work done, and I got pulled in by Zoya, but because I was saying that I was not going to be available. But hi, everybody. I think I know most of you, but we might not have seen each other on video before. But I'm Kieran Fatima, and I'm on, I'm in Canada, and I don't know. I got involved with a lot of the folks here through these Twitter spaces we were holding. But before then, uh, I was sort of a liberal, progressive type for a long time, for most of my life. And then it became where it became more and more obvious to me that the issue was deeper, that there were deeper issues. Now, I'm originally from Pakistan. I was born there and I lived there till I was 12. And then I lived in the US for a while, and then I moved to Canada. So throughout that whole period, I really did. My politics evolved quite a bit. When I was younger, they weren't that great. My parents were kind of sort of apolitical, but sort of relatively liberal for their circle, for their crowd. And anyway, eventually I got really enthralled with Bernie Sanders and the sort of energy around the Bernie Sanders campaign. And it got me to really explore. It sort of gave me something that I was kind of getting to on my own anyway, slowly. But I think that it introduced me, and I was very active online on Twitter, and especially I got to know a lot of people who were socialists, like real socialists, who had been socialists for a long time. And I started to read, I started to listen to some podcasts and read some books about socialism, about Marxism. And slowly over time, I mean, there's a lot more to it, but after the first Bernie Sanders campaign in 2016 kind of crashed into Hillary's hot sauce or whatever packaging. After that whole debacle, I couldn't continue to be whatever this sort of milquetoast little social democrat anymore. So I started to explore. I started to go deeper, and I started to talk to some of the people who I knew were actual socialists. And what really always resonated with me was anti-imperialism, because I'm from a country that has actually suffered and continues to be under the boot of imperialism, forever, but colonialism and imperialism. So I know the history of my region of the world, South Asia. And anyway, so that kind of, I connected the dots more, and eventually realized that I wanted to, that I was not just looking for Medicare for all and all that, which I think are great policies and need to be pursued for sure, but that wasn't enough. And I realized that all of that, a lot of what we want here in the West, those of us who live here, if all we want is a few more accommodations or a few more privileges for ourselves, we're really still part of the problem, because a lot of those things that come at the expense of the people in the global South, people like me, people like my family that are still there. So I wanted to take a step back and take a broader look, which led me to Marxism, Leninism, and that's where we're at. That's where I am right now. So there's a lot more to it, but that's sort of the big picture.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. It's great to have you here. We have about.
Thank you so much, Kieran, for joining and powering through. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. So we have about 22 minutes. We have a few people who are just now joining the panel now. So I want to introduce the next Zoe. I'm not too familiar. Zoe, do you want to give her a proper introduction? I think you're more familiar with KB. Can you introduce her?
Yes, so this is KB, another great friend from Spaces, extremely knowledgeable and powerful voice. KB served in the military and has a lot of insider knowledge about their corruption as well as their inefficiency. Like KB was telling me about how a certain type of airplane that would take China, I believe, like 2 years to build, takes America 15 years to build. So I just thought she could give us some insights on that.
All right, great. So we have about 20 minutes, but I'm glad you was able to join me. So I'm gonna ask you this question, KB, since you joined us. Thank you for joining us for this Anti-Imperialist Summit. I would love your perspective, especially considering Zoya said you came from the military, because we were talking about anti-imperialism and how imperialism affects our world as we know it. So I just want to get your background, like how you got to where you're at right now in politics, any organizing if you do that, and just general your political journey and your thoughts on imperialism, just so we can get your opinions while we got time here. We got audio. I can't hear you for some reason. Is it just me, guys? Can anyone on the panel hear? Okay.
I can't.
Just KB, just try to come log out and log back in. Try to leave, because sometimes I fix it. Sometimes it happens randomly. So yeah, we're gonna do the introduction with KB. I know Brad. I know you want to respond now. We want to get Rick back in here as well. Fortunately, we got only 20 minutes left on this, but we are also me and Zoe. We're also doing a panel on Sunday, I believe, and maybe we can have a more robust conversation. I think we're doing a Marxism panel. Is that right, Zoya?
Yes.
Yeah. So we see. Hopefully I can give you guys a little more time. This is the finale of the day. Hopefully we get KB back in. While we wait for her, Brad, I want to get you in here. I think you said you had a response.
Yeah, sure.
Climate thing.
Maybe I'll save some of the Marxism nerds shit for Sunday then. I just curse on these things. I assume.
No, he's all good. I say worse all the time.
All right, cool. I should probably be more worried about my kids running around in the background, but I think that ship has sailed. Yeah, I was gonna say, like, I remember reading that article about like the rich people and all their bunkers and stuff, and I think there's, especially like when you look at that or you connect it to like just these like Peter Thiel type people, Elon Musk, who like Jeff Bezos, who think they're going to like leave Earth on their little spaceships. It is one of the most just like I come from like a decent science background, and it's one of the most absurd conceits that any of that is remotely possible. The idea that any sort of like space project is not dependent upon just layer after layer of like complex systems, human technology, social arrangements, social relations of production, all of which sits upon a very basic basis of agriculture. And the idea that like you could knock out like agriculture and like that entire thing will just come crashing down is probably my favorite like just derangement that I see shared by otherwise educated people, like STEM guys, like in tech. I've talked to like some very smart engineers who believe that, which is one of the most childish, ignorant things that anyone could ever believe. And it is very funny to see just like the power of like the ideological framing that can create people who are so just like malformed in their application of their intelligence, where they can produce technology that is useful to capital while being completely incapable of just reasoning about the world in which, in the context in which they do that work. But so I think like some of that applies to a slightly lesser extent to like the bunker stuff. I think all these people, they have just like this like assumption that like stuff's going to get bad, but nobody seems to understand that like everything is commodities getting produced in like factories from like raw materials that are like ripped out of the earth or are grown on farms. And like I feel like most people, like as an intentional product of our educational system, I just have absolutely no conception of just how much complexity there is. Like if you think about just going into a Walmart and you think about if you traced every product back to the primary commodities that it is comprised of, the sheer just network of all that it's so vast. Anyway, I just kind of find it very funny, like some of the ideas that certain technologies will continue to exist if like civilizational living collapses.
Yeah, I mean, how will the ruling class live if there's no working class for them to to produce all of their shit, including their food and everything they need to survive, right? And I think this is a great indication of like how the ruling class can be smart, not intelligent, right? I think there's a really important distinction. And when we talk, speaking to your initial question, Nick, about like kind of like what we view as kind of like our primary political project, particularly as myself as an Asian settler in Hawaii, where Asian settler colonialism is a thing, and hopefully. I've been really trying to get some Kanaka comrades to come to your next shows. Hopefully we can make that happen. I think one of them is even watching right now. So, but anyway, I think like I think it's if we want to talk about real intelligence, let's talk about indigenous intelligence, right? Indigenous life ways that have produced, the abundance and infused their intelligence and their labor into the land that was stolen from them, right? And all of the rewards that were reaped from it, that the ruling class takes credit for, that they didn't put any work into, right? All they put forward was capital. And if we want to talk about like what the future looks like, the future we need, you kind of offered up, the dark alternative, right? What we are up against is an eco-fascist barbarism, right? And the only viable alternative, it seems, is a decolonial eco-socialism that's feminist, that is led by queer, Black, and indigenous people, or else it'll be bullshit. because if we don't return the land to the stewardship of the people who are its historical protectors, then none of this is going to work, right? We can't science, Western science, our way out of this alone. We need indigenous science. We need to be in solidarity with indigenous people, not just for our own self-preservation, but because it's the right thing to do. Especially as socialists, if we want to view things from a Marxist analytic, right? Theft of land and water and displacement of peoples, that is the greatest expropriation of wealth in world history, right? That is what primitive accumulation is all about.
Sorry, I just got here, so I just want to say, is that our average NATO abolisher? Is that you?
Yes.
Nice. Hello. I was
NATO. What was the name? NATO abolisher. What was the name?
Now he's gonna have to change it. that's what the private chat is for.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
I tagged him on Twitter.
You put it on Twitter.
No, the NSA knows.
Maybe let's see if your mic works.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. That was very
you said you're going to expose the military, they cut your mic.
Say that again?
As soon as you said you're going to expose the military, they cut your mic. So
yeah,
for sure.
Secrets.
Yeah, my my FBI case handlers watching. Maybe my CIA one is.
They're all watching. All of ours handlers are watching.
Oh yeah, that's true. That's true. Okay, so hey y'all, my name is KB. My pronouns are they, them. And yeah, I don't even know where to start with my political journey. I'll just say for brevity, I came from a conservative fundamentalist Christian background. So grew up watching like Fox News and all that. Moved into libertarianism when, I guess I threw away God. I'll say it like that. Which was like a very, I don't know, like reactionary period of my life to be a Black libertarian, I think. And then I don't even know what like the triggering event, I guess, would be for me that like made me more aware of like capitalism and stuff like that. But I eventually like became an anti-capitalist right before going into the military. And then from there, like being in the military, like I always say on these spaces that the point of boot camp is to like break you down so that they can like indoctrinate you. So, because a lot of the folks that are enlisted, that are joining, come from like very small towns, where, you know, they're like trying to escape, or they come from predominantly, you know, oppressed nationality backgrounds, meaning like Black and brown. So the military is used as a way out. And in boot camp, they physically beat you down and break you down so that they can build you up with all the values of the military, right? Which is just like a bunch of bullshit. So, like, I don't know. I don't think that process didn't really work on me because I was like already like hip to the game in terms of just like knowing that this is like a indoctrination process, and that like none of this shit is really real. So yeah, from there, I'm just sorry. I'm trying to think of like
No worries, no worries.
my military career because like I honestly blocked a lot of shit out. But yeah, so I was a intelligence analyst in the military, which like I don't even know how I got there. I didn't know what intelligence was before I joined. Like I was 20 years old. I had literally never even heard of intelligence. But like from my experience there, I thought that it was like I thought intel itself was very circular in terms of we don't know where the information is coming from. I'll say it like that. But we're told that it's authentic, essentially, and that like this is legit. But I mean, it's all shaped by, you know, like American interests and American biases and stuff like that. So sorry, I'm petering out, y'all. Like,
It's okay. That's okay. I want to get an opportunity to get Ricky here as well. I know you got cut out a little bit. I know this technology is very strange as we see. So we were defining the U.S. empire and the impact that imperialism has, and I want to give you an opportunity to sum up your thoughts that you was given earlier and on that topic, because I'm gonna try and give I'm gonna try to get Karen back in here as well, because I want to give you a little bit more time to speak, and I'll pass it back to KB. Maybe give. I regret that we ran out of time. I feel bad, but it go by so fast. Maybe we can get you back. Maybe we get you guys back in on Sunday. But let's get Rick in here, and then let's go Karen, and then we see where we at our time after that.
Yeah, so essentially what I was trying to say is that, you know, the structure of capitalism keeps us poor, and in the structure that we exist in, you know, there is an imperialist system that oppresses not only its own countrymen, but also it has its arms and tentacles all over the world and exports capital rather than the export and import of commodities, essentially, that helps build the means of production of other countries. And we can see that in Dallas as well, that, you know, the police department, it's an extremely bloated police department, which has $500 million in its police budget. Unrequited, unbelievable amount. The police officers go and train over in Israel with the IDF, and they come back here and they kill the the oppressed nationality people, the black and brown people. This is unconscionable. This is unbelievable. This is just a systemic nature of how imperialism extends into the world, and then, you know, brings back the worst of its kind on its people as well, through the usage of the police, through the usage of the US military, and the destruction of not only um, society within the US, but also across the world as well. And in doing so, we know that the US military is the greatest polluter in world history. It's the largest organization that does it, and that's what is, you know, and that we can see that, you know, it does this because it's such a large organization. And most of the funding comes from the US government, in which other sections of society remain as underdeveloped as it is. But, you know, you have extreme funding towards and development of companies and missile companies like Raytheon and Lockheed Martin and all of these other countries that go and bomb, even as we see today, provide provision of arms, etc., to Ukraine, etc. And that's what imperialism generally, exists in, this structure, this uh, this this base of the capitalist class. Um, but what I want to end with is on a positive note, that imperialism can be defeated. And historically it has been defeated. Um, Today it's an important date, because um, today is when the fall of Saigon happened, and the official reunification of Vietnam happened. The removal of troops from through the helicopters in Saigon, the victory of the North Vietnamese, the victory of Vo Nguyen Giap and the Vietnamese army, a dedicated force that remove U.S. Power through collective action, to the sheer belief in themselves, did this. And in 11 days' time, it will be Victory Day in Russia, the defeat of the Nazi army in 1945. Um, so it is possible, my friends. We can and will fight for a better tomorrow. A better world is possible, and that's
Yeah.
what I will leave you with. Thank you.
Thank you. And the thing is, this could have easily been a 2 hour panel. Unfortunately, I really do gotta get out here soon. I do want to get Karen in here, for any final thoughts like regarding fighting the U.S. empire, where they can find you. Maybe I can do a quick final shout out for each one of you guys. But Karen, any last thoughts? I want to give you in here one more time since you joined later. Anything regarding what Rick said, how we fight imperialism, and the role of the U.S. empire on our daily lives. So very broad topic, but I want to give you the last thought to give you one more word before you wrap up.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, that's a huge topic. I do talk about it a lot. I have my show on Red Life Planet. I'm also starting a magazine for people who are socialists and anti-imperialists, for stories, poetry, artwork, because I want to focus on creative ways of expressing exactly that thought about imperialism and the living under imperialism and fighting imperialism. Imperialism is, it's a broad topic, but it really comes down to when a country, uh, the elite or the ruling class of one country, um, become rich at the expense of other countries. Like that's really what it comes down to. Now there are, more technical definitions of it, that I'm sure you can read. Many of us know, have read Lenin, and for example. But really, that's what it comes down to. It's not just when a country like invades another country. That's not it, because there could be other reasons for that invasion. It's not just when there's a war. It's not just when one country trades with another country. It's when one country's elites rely on other countries being poor for them to be rich. And in this, for example, Warren Buffett, Bill Gates, George Soros, Jeff Bezos, these people and many others, the old money, the DuPonts and the Carnegies and all of those people, they rely on Haiti and Pakistan and Bangladesh and Peru and Colombia and Cambodia being poor, and all of Africa almost. They rely on these countries remaining poor because their resources have to be stolen by the mining companies that are based in Canada, for example. So Canada has a huge amount of mining companies, and the wealthiest people who own the biggest shares in those mining companies, they need those countries to be poor, because if Ghana, the country of Ghana, where Canada has a lot of mining interests, if the people of Ghana started becoming aware, educated, and started demanding their own rights, demanding equal pay, demanding livable wages or health care, then that'll cut into the profits of the wealthy billionaires who are mostly Canadian, American, British, European, whatever. And for them to stay rich, the people of Ghana must stay poor. That's imperialism. And that is actually what the reason for that is that the military, for example, the military industrial complex, which KB and others have referred to, that actually serves that imperialism. The military is there to be the goons of those corporations for those mining interests and oil companies and all that. The military, the US military, has over 800 foreign military bases in almost every country, like 150 countries in the world. Why is that? They're there to ensure that the business interests of the United States and its allies, the imperialists, they're there as a pressure, a force, literally a force to continue to keep those countries under the boot of imperialism. But that doesn't help the people in the US either. That doesn't help the people in Canada. For example, the US spends $1 trillion now in military budget. That money could be going to people in America, right? Canada's military budget is going up by $8 billion this year. So all of that money is not even going to us, the people who live in these imperialist countries, right? The average working class people. We don't actually see that. It's the elites that benefit from it. So it is actually in our interest to actually be anti-imperialist. Just because we live in these countries doesn't mean that it's in our interest for imperialism to continue. That's my point. So it is really about defunding imperialism. And that is the only way we're going to have a future. So in order to fund our future, we need to defund imperialism. Thanks.
And I explain to people all the time that the military industrial complex is siphoning money from our community. So I really wish we had more time. I definitely got to have you guys in our call-in sessions